what we value and what we feel and what we create are a lot more connected than you might think. Hey folks, it's Mary, aka MercyTriumphs, and this is Slow Crochet. Today's video is a bit of a response video to both something that came up in the Mousy Makes podcast, hi Miss Helen, and something that Shannon talked about over at Shannon Talks Yarn. So what this is instead of leaving infinitely long comments on those videos, which I will have linked below, I thought I would make a dedicated video. This is one of the most fun things about having a YouTube channel is being able to connect with others and kind of go back and forth and share ideas. Now, y'all know me, I love to go deeper than just what's on the surface. And I'm not just talking about surface crochet. I'm talking about why we do what we do. Why are we motivated to create? And how do our emotions and our thoughts and our hearts play out in the idea of us creating? So in Helen's video, she read an excerpt, an essay from a century-old book for children, and it was talking about the value of things, the value of gold and silver and money, and what actually is value, how we ascribe value, and what ultimately is really the most valuable. Then Shannon was talking about what do you do when someone rejects the thing that you've made. You've made them this beautiful crocheted piece and either they regift it, they don't want it, it ends up in a thrift store, and maybe you find out about it later. What do you do with your heart there? How does that feel? And so I thought the two really kind of connected because I was thinking about why we value handmade things, why we as creators value handmade things, and then ultimately, what is the fate, the ultimate depressing maybe, how do you say depressing with a laugh? I don't know, I just did it. But how do you reconcile the fact that our lives are temporary and the things that we own, the things that we create, the things that we do have very small impact in the wide world? And so why is it that it matters so much to us, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe it doesn't matter a whole lot? So I want to talk through my thought process in connecting value and our hearts and our emotions and the relationships and why we make what we make and maybe why we feel what we feel. So let's get into it. So number one, yes, it is kind of depressing, maybe even a little bit morbid, but it's also very honest and very real to understand that our time on this earth is limited. And so even when you spend so much time making a beautiful piece, it might just not outlast you. The person that it's left to may not value it as much as you do. Recently, in the last few years, when my grandmother passed, a whole house full of wonderful, amazing things were left. And we grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and the children, we picked through it all. And believe you me, there were many treasures there, but at the same time, there were many things no one wanted. Surprisingly, no one wanted my grandmother's stuffed bear from her childhood. No one valued it. Does it mean that my grandmother didn't value it? No, of course not. But she's no longer here. And so what do we do with that? Do we need to keep it just because? Or do we get to determine what matters in our lives? When I look at my grandmother's teddy bear from her childhood, I don't think of my grandmother. I didn't know her as a child. Same thing with her knitting needles. I have no memories of her knitting, but I have plenty of memories of her cooking, plenty of memories of her going on adventures and sharing her heart with her grandchildren. And so the things that I selected to keep from her are things relative to cooking, things that would always be in the kitchen, things that I knew that I would really treasure for a long time and get some practical use out of. Do I feel guilty that many of the things from her household, even after they were picked over by so many family members, do I feel guilty that those things went on to thrift stores or to charity and someone else may have gotten them? No, I don't. Just because someone else values it doesn't mean that I will. So that's my number one point, that ultimately, however much value we ascribe to the things that we make, ultimately, one day, we won't be here. And sometimes those things will outlast us, but they might not be as valuable as they were when we had them in our hands. But even after we're gone, I should hope that what's more important than the things is the person. My mother's mother passed before I was born, and one day I asked my father, what was my grandmother like? What was his mother-in-law like? And he said, well, you know your grandfather. I want you to think about your mother, and I want you to subtract from your mother all the qualities of your grandfather. And what you have left was your grandmother. And what that showed me was that my grandmother that I'd never met imbued herself into my mother. And Mom, I love you. I hope I'm not making you cry. But yes, the warmth, the kindness, the generosity of spirit, the work ethic, the beauty, the attention to detail. My mother is a phenomenal woman, and who she is shows me who my grandmother was. My grandmother imparted herself, her values, her love into my mother through that relationship. So it's not about the things that my grandmother owned that defined her, it's who she was and how she made others' lives better. So that is a reflection of really what's truly valuable. The things might have value for a time, but it's the people, it's the relationships. That's what's really going to make an impact. So now let's come to what happens when we create something specifically for someone else and they don't want it, or they don't take good care of it, or in some way it's rejected, it's not wanted, it's passed aside. The first thing I want to say on this point is that it hurts. And it's okay. It's okay if it hurts when you give someone a gift and they treat it with disrespect. There are not a lot of actual needs that we have as humans. There's a lot of wants, there's a lot of preferences, but in terms of actual needs, there's relatively few. We need security, we need love, we need safety, we need to feel respected, we need autonomy, we need freedom from shame to some degree. But in terms of our actual needs, I think two really kind of play into those feelings of rejection, those feelings of sadness, those feelings of hurt when something that we've made isn't received the way we hoped it would. And those two needs would be the need for love and the need for respect. When we create, it is a deeply personal experience. We're choosing yarn, we're choosing stitches, we're choosing patterns. We put our hearts into it, we put our skill into it, we put our time, we put our hope. I really like the concept of a prayer shawl in that when you create a prayer shawl, every stitch you are thinking of the person that you're making it for. And whether it's a shawl, whether it's prayer, or whether it's just something that you hope will delight someone else, that love, I believe, goes into the thing that you're making. And so because it's love, you're offering someone part of your heart. You're offering someone an expression of how you feel about them. I would say it's similar to writing a piece of poetry for someone, or maybe a child has drawn a picture for their teacher, or maybe the 2-year-old has a handful of weeds and they're offering them as a bouquet to their mother. There is such an innocence and such a purity of heart when we make something for someone else. And I want to take a minute just now to validate that. When you make something for someone else, your heart is innocent, it's pure, it's beautiful. It is a wonderful thing to take your skills, your time, your energy, your effort, even your money, and to create something for someone else. That's generosity, that's selflessness. And that deserves to be recognized and honored. That is a high quality characteristic that you have. That's integrity, that's beauty. That's the look we're going for in this world. Would that more of us had that same heart of generosity for others? And so it's very understandable that when you've created this wonderful piece and it's given and it's rejected, it's really sad. It can be devastating. It can lead us to shut our hearts down. It can lead us to put up walls and say, that person's not safe. That person doesn't respect me. That person doesn't really love me. So many ways that we could get hurt through offering our hearts through this created thing. Now, the problem is, even if you are a creative person, you might not always value the handmade gift as much as someone else would. And this even goes back to one day I won't be here anymore. And whether or not the things I make remain after me, I won't have another say in it. So I can understand why it would be absolutely heartbreaking to have someone throw away your gift or thrift your gift or re-gift your gift, or in Shannon's case, completely forgot that you gave it to them in the beginning and ask for another of the same type. Oh my goodness, Shannon, that story was just, it blew my mind. But that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, I don't think that that person realizes the impact that they're having on you. And this is one of the challenges, because as creators, we're deeply in touch with our hearts. We're deeply in touch with our emotions. And not everyone else is, to be honest. Not everyone else is aware not only of the skill and the time and the effort it takes to create something, but not everyone else is aware of their impact on you. I don't know how many times I get in arguments with my husband, because we're human. And we will come to this moment where he says, honey, I am not trying to hurt you. And I say, I know, and I'm not trying to hurt you either. We're trying to communicate. But in the process, we hurt each other. We don't mean to. Not a single one of us. And this is just a little extra bonus tip. If you are married and you're feeling really discouraged right now, please know that your wedding vows are the ultimate destination. It takes a lifetime to get there. No one gets married thinking, let me just screw up this person's life and mine. When you get married, you're on a journey to fulfill your vows, and it's going to take a while to get there. So just because it doesn't look pretty, just because it's not what you thought it would be, doesn't mean that that person isn't doing what they can to fulfill their vows. And just because you're in pain doesn't mean that you're actually not working yourself to fulfill your vows as well. So take it back to this other place of crochet, this act of giving and receiving. What do we need to do? I would say, number one, let's understand our own hearts so that we can give grace to others and adjust our expectations. We pour our hearts into our craft and they don't receive it. Well, here's a couple of questions. Number one, this is a relational exchange. So the question is, what do I need from this person? What's the response that I want? And how will I feel if I get that response? And how will that feeling validate or reinforce that my need is being met? If I create something for my husband and I give it to him and he's like, oh, cool, and he sets it aside, well, when I made that for him, was I looking for validation? Was I looking for love? Was I looking for praise? Was I looking for respect? Did I want attention from him? Did I want him to say, honey, you are amazing. You are so wonderful and I love you so much. Thank you so much. Did I want that kind of response? Am I attaching my need for respect and love and acceptance on this gift? Or am I saying, I love you so much that I took my time and effort and I made this for you? It's really a question of, what is my own heart doing? Are there strings attached to the gift? And this is where it might become necessary to ratchet down our expectations just a little bit. There are so many ways that we receive love, that we receive security, that we get our needs met. And really the question is, am I putting so much on this gift, and then when it's rejected, it's not just, oh, I'm so sorry, that's not the right size. Oh, I'm so sorry, I have so many blankets, I physically don't have space for another one, but thank you. Is it a full rejection of the gift itself, the object, or is it a rejection of my heart? And if we can take a minute and maybe try to distinguish what's really going on here in my own heart, maybe there's a little bit more freedom in that. Again, most people are not out to hurt those that they love. They're not sitting around thinking about how they can make others' lives miserable or do the most damage. Most people aren't thinking about that at all. So maybe we could give them a little bit of grace, and we can look at our own hearts and saying, why am I putting so much on this gift? My husband doesn't want to hurt me. He's not rejecting me. He's just really busy. And to be honest, what is he going to do with this object that I made him? Is it something that I made for my own pleasure? Was I hoping to get a certain response from him? Or is it something that I can just give and say, whatever happens, happens, that's fine? Over time, I have put in a lot of effort to make a lot of things for people that are just not appreciated. I've made sweaters for family members. My goodness, I made a sweater for my husband and it fit him great. And then he started going to the gym some more, and suddenly he doesn't fit the sweater anymore. And oh my goodness, do I blame him for that? No, I made it for him out of love. And if he can't fit it, so be it. He's going to hang on to it. Maybe eventually one of the children will wear it. But if not, someone someday can use the yarn. It doesn't even matter. For me, I made him something that he requested. He loved it. It wasn't a long time, but that's okay. It served its purpose. As Shannon so eloquently mentioned, in giving the gift, it does fulfill its purpose. I think if we can go on that deeper level, I think if we can examine our hearts a little bit and think about what really matters, even going back to value, think about how much I value this relationship. How is my heart and my love for this person and the value I have for this relationship, how is that reflected in what I've made for them and how I'm feeling when that's either accepted or one way or another rejected? Is that an indication that maybe the relationship isn't as strong as I thought it was, or is there something in my heart that I realize I'm actually not getting this need met? So my hope in saying all of this is really to encourage you, to give you a little bit of perspective, and maybe to invite you to think a little bit more deeply into your own heart, why you do what you do, how beautiful and wonderful and generous you are, that you would take the time and the effort to make something for someone. And even if it's not received, that's not an indictment on you. It doesn't invalidate your character or your motives or anything like that. Sometimes it really is just a practical thing and the person doesn't even realize that they're having the effect that they did. I will say, though not every relationship fits into this, I think there are some relationships where it would behoove us to be a little bit bold and tell the other person how their choice affects our hearts. Hey, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but I put a lot of time and effort into that, and it really hurt when you regifted it. It really hurt when you said you didn't like it, whatever the case may be. Some relationships really are worth it, and if it's still bothering you after a time, I think that's something to maybe ponder is how much emotional equity is in that relationship. Is it worth you being a little bit brave and speaking up for yourself and saying, actually, your choices affected me and that wasn't okay. So in the future, let's be a little bit more clear because I really did put a lot of love into this. I know you're not rejecting me. I know you don't mean me to take it personally, but it actually does hurt. I really did put a lot of love into this for you. But in the future, let me know how I can better show you my love or show you respect or whatever it may be. Sometimes those conversations are necessary, especially for the relationships that are closest to your heart, maybe your immediate family, maybe close friends. But if there isn't a lot of emotional equity in that relationship, if there's not a high level of vulnerability there, if it's not a super tight one, then yeah, maybe it's okay to just say in the future, yep, nope, I can't make that for you. Nope, it's not going to work for me. And be okay with that. While we do need love and respect and security and safety in general, we can't get it from everyone. Not everyone is going to like us. Not everyone's going to respect us. Not everyone's going to love us. So instead, what are the relationships that are worth the investment? And the ones where we really can let our guards down and offer something beautiful to those people and have it be received. And if it's not well received the first time, actually have that conversation so that we can learn to love each other better. Y'all, thank you so much for being willing to go deep with me and get into the nitty-gritty of our hearts as it relates to crochet. Thank you again to Miss Helen over at the Mousy Makes podcast. And thank you again to Shannon at Shannon Talks Yarn. I just love getting to go a little bit deeper on these really fun subjects for me. This is really where I love to be. So thank you ladies again for inspiring this topic of a video. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel. Thank you for everyone who has commented and liked and helped promote the channel. It's just a fun thing that we're doing here on YouTube. Hopefully these rambling thoughts have encouraged you or given you a little bit of perspective or helped you think about things in a different way. Ultimately, life is hard. There's a lot of emotions that are just not fun to deal with, but you're not alone. And things that hurt, usually there's a reason for it. But feelings are not a judgment on your character, and it's not a value judgment on your worth. So I hope that you hear that above everything else. And if I'm not your cup of tea, thank you for listening all the way this long. I do appreciate you, and I do hope I'll see you again soon. Bye.